Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest, Daniel McCabe, has attempted something quite rare and done it quite successfully. In an hour-and-a-half documentary, McCabe has powerfully captured not just the current political and economic realities for the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, but the country's history, its relationship to the West and colonialism, and without stating it obviously, the similarities America increasingly shares with the Congo. Let's take a look at the trailer for This Is Congo.
For security reasons, I will call myself Colonel Kasongo. What I can tell you is that I am a high-ranking officer in the Congolese army. Our hope was always to bring stabilization to Congo, but the fighting continues.
To peace in Democratic Republic of Congo.
Kila mtu anajua kama ni mtu wa leta. Akisha kuona tunanyenere ni frank.
Where there's corruption, development can't exist.
They have definitely had outside help.
The main power is the power of the gun.
Na wale ambaye wangeweza kutusaidia ndio walifanya hii mambo.
If anybody provokes us, we will be back.
Hata vita naanza, niye siwezi acha ku.
People have lost trust in their government.
We are Congolese, we must stand for this country. It's our country.
Mais si nous faisons tout ça pour notre État, c'est l'amour du pays. C'est l'amour de notre peuple. Et c'est la défense de notre intégrité territoriale.
Everybody, please welcome Daniel McCabe. Congratulations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this documentary. Honestly, the work of documentarians it's God's work in a lot of ways. You do a number of years of work, you get paid very little, you put your life at risk simply to just educate people and because you're fascinated with a subject. So thank you for doing it.
Sure, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I really mean it. Most people, it's like, I talk to people who love documentaries and it's always like, but I could never make that. I could never do that. That's too much work. So how long in the making was This Is Congo for you?
It was about 3.5 years on the ground filming, over 500 hours of footage. But all in all, from beginning fundraising to completion, it was almost 8 years.
And how did it start for you? What made you interested in Congo?
Well, this is my first film. Prior to this, I was a freelance photojournalist, and I had covered a conflict in the Congo in 2008. So that was my first time into the country, and it impacted me pretty profoundly. And returning back home, I wanted to go back. There was reason to go back, and I wanted to challenge myself with other storytelling tools. You know, it wasn't really accomplishing what I felt I should, just with stills and trying to sell those on the media market.
Now, this is filmed and directed by you, and some of the footage in this is clearly from dangerous situations. What was it like being in that?
Very scary. You know, it's tricky. Obviously, in the film, we thrust the viewer right into these moments, this danger, and immerse them in it. But it was years of work to try and get that access. And then once that access was there, you know, you're embedded with an army unit. You just kind of fall into place.
And it's not like an American military unit and being embedded with them, where they're like, you hang out over here, like way over here, and we'll come back and tell you what happened.
Yeah, no. It's a bit more disconnected. You know, there's not really the medical staff or any of the support that normally you would have embedding with Western units. So a lot of it was, you know, tens of miles outside of any kind of security and just winging it.
So when did you realize, let me reframe this. When you first went to Congo and you first started shooting, is that when you realized that you had a kind of microcosm story for a sort of universal condition about man and how countries can succeed and fail?
No, you know, I think my initial experiences in the Congo kind of led me to know that there was this void in our ability to understand what was happening. You know, often the reports we hear or the films we see focus on very specific items. But what I saw being on the ground was it was a much bigger picture, and to understand the root causes of the conflict, we had to dig a lot deeper and dig into the history of the country. So when I arrived to begin filming the film wholeheartedly, it was almost like the beginning year and a half was a research phase where I needed to kind of shed the naive Western ideas I came with and re-educate myself through the local team I was working with and the characters themselves.
How hard was it to find people that would tell the truth or knew the truth about the history of the Congo? Because so much of a country like that is embedded in propaganda, it's embedded in different kind of storytelling to sort of try to keep one faction against another. So how hard was it to find the truth? Because one of the things that's great about this is that it's not a talking head historian, it's people who actually live there who are actually in this.
Yeah, you know, it was tricky, and we've got a lot of characters in the film. The three main characters we see on the ground, where the camera kind of exists with them in a verite way, none of them could really speak to the accurate history of the country, and this is where this hidden silhouetted military figure comes in, acting as kind of a narrator. He's a very educated man. He was able to help the characters and the film connect those dots between their reality of today and how that's contextualized with the past.
But even he wants to be silhouetted when just speaking about the history of the country.
Exactly. That's how off the rails things are.
Is that what he said? Is that why he wanted to be?
Yeah. Well, first off, he's not allowed to speak with me without being given permission by his commanding officers. So that's kind of a no-no, not necessarily a life-threatening no-no, but ultimately with what happens throughout the film and what happens throughout the country, things are getting to a really intense place. So being critical of the corruption in the government can have really serious repercussions, and I think he was concerned about that.
Now, there's a section of the film where it feels like you are, without really stating it obviously, or really stating it at all, drawing direct parallels from where Congo is now and where America seems like it may be sliding towards, just in terms of the ciphering off of wealth to a certain class of people, rising inequality, and tribalism within those that are, not of the wealthy elite.
Yeah, you know, I like to look at the film as kind of a universal story. You know, while over the course of the film you're being educated about the specifics of this area and its history, it's a bigger story. It's about the corruption of man, the banality of war, and what I hope the viewers are able to walk away with is less answers of how to fix Congo, but more questions about how Congo got there, and it's informed by their own experiences here within America or in the Western world.
You used the phrase "the banality of war." How do you define that?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's senseless. When we see this, what it's like at the tip of the spear, and how senseless and disorganized things can be, it becomes crazy to me. I think at that level, in many ways, we've lost our connection with why wars are being fought. And it becomes about individuals at that point, which defeats the purpose of having organized military fighting for a cause.
They also feel it's gotten so crazy that you feel totally powerless to it as well. So you end up just sort of living with the violence, which in its own way becomes a part of the banality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the hardest part about making this documentary over the course of 6-8 years, you said?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was stamina. You know, it was a long game for us. Trying to, aside from trying to shoot it in those types of environments, which is difficult, trying to draw attention and fundraise for a project like this is even more difficult. So it took us years to get the funds and get the support and get the team behind us to really help this project get to where it was going. And then once it was completed, just getting it out into the world, you know. We premiered last fall in Venice, and have had a really robust festival run, but that's all just to get to this theatrical point that we're at now, which is to get the film in front of as many eyeballs as we can. So it's an uphill battle the whole way, and I think it's the same for people on the ground in Congo.
And it's interesting too, because what happens in Congo is very directly related to our relationship to them in a lot of ways, both historically and currently, yet it's not a subject or a geopolitical crisis of any kind that is in vogue to talk about at the moment. Whereas like a Syria documentary, not to put any of them down, a lot of them are really fantastic. There was this blip where it was like a year and a half where Syria documentaries were just coming out nonstop.
Yeah. That's a tough one to jump into. I mean, there's these hot topics, like Syria is one of these things where it rises into the media limelight and we're interested. But I think Congo often, because of how complex it is, it's when something's too confusing for us to decipher, we just turn the channel or we just won't put it up in the news slot. We'll reduce that into a quick little blip. Oh, it's sexual violence, or it's resources, or it's corruption. Sure, those are components, but that's not the whole picture. And if you're only looking at one aspect, you really don't understand why. So what the film is hopefully about is it's about bringing people into a place where they understand, all right, it's all these variables, and I need to consider all of these things, not just one. For example, conflict minerals. Like, we like to imagine if we eliminate the flow of conflict resources from Congo, peace will happen. In my experience, that's not true. You know, you have a government-controlled mine where we're calling it conflict-free, and a rebel-controlled mine where that has conflict resources. It's probably more violent for the civilians in the government-controlled mines. So just our Western understanding of that is off right from the jump. So it's about really knowing what's going on and listening to people on the ground of what is wrong and how do we fix it, not just coming in with our ideas.
And we generally listen to the government rather than the people on the ground, because those are the people that we can build coalitions with, whether or not they're dictators or not, it seems.
Sure, I mean, and you got to start somewhere, and negotiating with rebels is not any real way of getting anywhere.
It's just not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. But Congo, like many places, is especially vulnerable because of the corruption within the government. You have to negotiate with them, but if that negotiation stops there, then you're kind of at a standstill.
A fair amount of the film is spent with General Mamadou, who died just this past January or last January, excuse me?
January 2013.
Oh, it was
2014.
14 that he passed away?
Yeah.
Excuse me. What made you focus on him so much?
Well, I mean, he was intensely charismatic, and he wanted me there too. We kind of had an arrangement where he was willing to let me inside of his unit and bring me to these places, and I was willing to create a platform for him to broadcast his propaganda from. So that relation, was a mutual relationship of give and take.
Is that a situation where, as much as what he's broadcasting is propaganda, as much as he may be sort of working for a corrupt government, he is loved by a fair amount of the people, right?
Sure. Well, Mamadou was 30 years old when he died. He was young. He was very courageous. Because of these things, the population rallied behind him. But I don't think it was because he was with the government. It's because what he was doing was providing the people with patriotism. They could rally behind one person for a common cause, and that gave him power, and ultimately that power is what kind of led to his downfall.
That said, when we talk about rallying behind one person and patriotism, we also start talking a fair amount about tribalism, and this documentary has moments where it touches on how tribalism is used to divide and essentially conquer a people in some respects.
Sure. I think in any conflict, there are these components. Tribalism is one. I think an easy comparative for us is religion. There's these systems of belief and loyalty that we all take part in, whether it's a sports team, a religion, a family group, or anything, tribalism. but those are also kitschs that can be twisted and used to manipulate us, manipulate our mind, control our loyalties. So in the case of the film, we see how tribalism is used as a manipulation tool, just as we see it in many places in the world, like religion. These are methods of control.
Yeah, I have to ask, going back to this, I know you said the film is meant to be universal, but do you see a lot of similarities in the way that America is behaving right now to where Congo is? I mean, maybe we're not that far along, but at least there are some. Do you see some similarities?
Absolutely. When I look at screenings now, all I can think about are those similarities. When we completed the film, there was a different president, and now I think with this new reality we're living in, it's in our face, and I can't help but see those comparisons even more clearly. They're hidden. We keep them well packaged and hidden in our country and in our culture. In Congo, without the infrastructure and without the resources, it sticks out a bit more. But it's universal. This is what man can do to each other.
How do you think we stop man from doing that?
Education. It's about understanding. I think if we don't understand why we're doing something, we'll forever continue to do it. We need to understand the reasons, the root causes, and the root reasons why we do these things. Why when we look at Congo, it's easy to say, oh, the resources, but it's so much more than the resources. It's keeping Congo in the shadows. Not only provides these valuable resources and the path to flow out, but it can compartmentalize a lot of these darker things that we never like to look at. Congo is a perfect example of how to keep this stuff hidden.
What are the dark things that we never want to look at?
Well, I mean, when you look at, I think an easy way to jump into it is looking at how the resources from Congo are involved in our everyday lives. Like cell phones, an easy one. I think we're all aware that within our iPhones there's coltan, and coltan, some of the coltan comes from Congo. Well, that's one of these things where we can't change cell phones. Those aren't going away. It's not only in cell phones, it's in satellites and pacemakers and all of our systems of communication and finance, but we can't touch that. It won't touch. We're not going to reduce that. We're not going to find a new higher strength capacitor. So it's to our benefit to just let these confusing things be confusing and to keep extracting.
Instead of finding a way to make them less confusing and spread the wealth around so that we're not actually pillaging these countries, we're actually working with them.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of pointing our attention towards solving the corruption issues in the country in a real way, the United States has had their hands in the Congo since throughout the colonial period. The uranium from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs came from Congo. So
you have someone in the documentary who says the great bomb that essentially made America the sort of the great global nation that we think of it, or maybe was thought of about 2 years ago.
Sure, and not only, I think in a few days we have Patrice Lumumba's birthday, had he still been alive, and the US CIA essentially commissioned his assassination, basically to win the Cold War battle that was happening in Congo. Because at that time, we were worried about Russia, and the United States and Russia are vying for power in Congo because of those resources. So we're playing this game at their expense just to have power.
What has been, I know that you're just taking this into theaters now for people to see, and it's mainly been a festival circuit prior, but what has been a lot of the reaction that you've seen? Because as we've kind of said, I think Africa, outside of maybe certain Arab nations in Africa, is mainly unexplored a lot of the time now. And it seems like something that people don't want to talk about or can't handle talking about because it is so confusing, or because so many of our resources do come from there. So you feel hypocritical for taking a stance of any kind when you're about to take a call on your cell phone or some other thing like that. What has been the response? Sorry, did I not finish the question?
The question? I mean, the response has been, it all varies on the viewers. I mean, the Congolese that have seen the film are taken back, and they're appreciative of the film not focusing too wholeheartedly on one specific thing. They love how it gives a bit of a history lesson and context. And the Western viewers, I think, are a bit flabbergasted. The film is intimate and impactful and traumatizing, so initially the responses are pretty slim, but I think over the days, it's a film that grows on you, so that 3 days later you start seeing reflections of what you saw in the film in your own life, or within different aspects of work, or things like that. So the impact is kind of hard to measure in that way, but I know that it's impactful. But it's tricky. The film doesn't provide answers. You walk away very confused and unsettled, but that's the point. And that's the reality of the people on the ground in Congo.
Has there been any, and I'm very uneducated on on many points, but on this point specifically, I think, has there been any coordination or discussion, or this administration have any sort of, have they put forward any kind of ideas about how to work with the Congolese people at all?
To be honest, I'm also, that's not my zone, but I know, like, right now where Congo is trying to get some elections on the tracks scheduled for December, and there's intense international pressure to do that. I don't feel very hopeful that it'll happen, because right now there's 4 different major wars raging in the Congo in different areas of the country.
Like impossible to have a peaceful election when that's going on.
Yeah, and there's no infrastructure. Yeah, there's no infrastructure in the country to begin with. So it's like a country the size of Western Europe with 500 miles of paved roads. It's intense. So I know there is influence. There's Western influence trying to do the right thing, but again, without working with the Congolese, without doing it in a responsible way, and doing it in a way that isn't our Western idea of what needs to happen. It's coming from within. I don't see a solution really happening.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question? Right here.
Hi, I'm wondering what the editing process was like. You said you had 500 hours of footage to work through, and how did you get all of that into decide what was important? Yeah,
the edit was tough. It took us a couple of years, and I say us, my editor, Elise Ardell-Spiegel, was a tour de force in it. In fact, I folded her into the process halfway through the filming process. She even would come out into the field with me and help conduct interviews. So it was tough, and to weave all these characters and the history inside was a real feat that I can't really take credit for. It was her handiwork, and she's especially talented with projects like this. She's worked on films with even more hours of archives, so impossible for me to take that challenge.
Yeah, the history is woven throughout the film quite well, and it doesn't just come up once, but there is one great sequence of the movie that goes through the history pretty in-depthly. I mean, specifically, I think, in regards to colonialism, and it's cut so beautifully with a great soundtrack, and it moves like a thriller in those moments, which is really hard to do.
Yeah, overall, we really wanted to create a cinematic ride for the viewer. Often documentaries, you've got somebody just talking at you, and it's droning, and it's tough to digest. But we wanted to create this environment, not only of experiencing what it's like being in Congo, but have the history kind of weave in and fold into us in a familiar way that we're used to receiving information in a more narrative way, I guess.
Next question.
Hi, we're going to take an online question. Don would like to know, what was the hardest part of filming, and do you have any advice for aspiring filmmakers?
Sure. The hardest part of filming was stamina, and just being able to keep my spirits up and keep focused on what I was doing. And I think the best advice I could give is to just be prepared to fail. Like making this film was failure after failure after failure, but those failures, initially, what I perceived to be failures, were really breakthroughs. So like when you think something's hard or you think you're making mistakes, that's a really good sign, and you have to just stay, keep your stamina. That's the only advice I could really give.
What was your hardest failure?
Well, I mean, I came into the country imagining completely different set of characters, and those that was informed by the books I had read, but it was informed by my Western preconception of what was going on. So it was about like breaking that down and realizing that I'm wrong, and I really don't know what I'm talking about, and I have to re-educate myself. So that was tough and kind of scary, being out there with all this support and now I kind of don't know what I'm doing, so to speak.
So like you had gotten, excuse me, a little bit of funding, and you were out there, and you were like, oh wait, that's not the film that I.
Well, sure. You know, initially I wanted to go out there and make a film that looked at the root causes of the conflict, and in my mind it was about resources, which sure it is, and it was about rebels controlling the country and destabilizing it, and it was about sexual violence and about all these things. But in reality, you find very little of that in the film, and that wasn't what arose to the surface that I thought could tell the story better.
Why do you think those other things arose to the surface?
I think it was because I calmed myself and allowed them to, and over time, I wanted the viewers to be able to identify with the characters and not see somebody that polarized them. For example, with our mineral smuggler, Mama Romance, you're in this rebel-controlled mine where you're looking for a nefarious, big, mean guy or some abused miner or a child soldier or whatever, but it was this big, roly-poly woman with this incredible voice that was doing this day in and day out to put her kids through school. That, to me, that was the thing that nobody's looking at, and that's the most important thing to look at. And not only that, but that's something that we can all relate to.
Person's got to eat, right?
Yeah, we all got to eat. We want our kids to have a bit more than we had, and we'll do anything we can for them.
Well, Daniel, congratulations. I love the film. It's incredible work, years and years of work, so congratulations on that. How can people see This Is Congo?
Well, we're having a theatrical premiere. It starts this Friday, the 29th. We're timing it to the 58th independence of colonial rule for Congo. It's at the Maisels Documentary Center in Harlem and at the Lemley in Los Angeles, and then hopefully in many more select cities throughout the U.S. and Canada.
Everybody give a big round of applause for Daniel McCabe. Let's hear it.